He was a faithful provider but an absent father. He believed that merely occupying the same house was enough, until one day, his children stopped speaking to him, stopped seeking him out, and eventually stopped showing him love. This is the story of a man named Jan, who nearly lost everything precious to him because he chose silence over substance. Remain with us until the very end, because after witnessing this journey, you will never look at your own family through the same eyes again. Many years ago, nestled in a hidden valley where the mountains kissed the misty rivers, lived Jan, a man whose face carried a deep weariness and whose soul was profoundly silent. His gaze always seemed distant, lost in a horizon only he could perceive. He was not old, yet time had aged him from the inside out. His walk was slow, not from physical weakness, but from the unbearable weight of memory. Since childhood, life had taught him not to expect anything from anyone. He learned to survive alone, not through bravery but through grim necessity. His own father, Gao, had been a severe, cold, and remote man, as if his heart had shuttered itself long before Jan was born. Gao offered few words, and when he did speak, it was only to correct harshly or to impose an absolute silence. Jan spent his youth desperate for a sign of approval, a flicker of warmth in his father's eyes, but it never came. Then one day, without warning, Gao simply vanished. There was no farewell, no explanation, as if his family were nothing more than a passing shadow in his existence. Only the hollow echo of a door slamming shut remained, a silence that became a permanent resident in their home. That sudden void, that profound absence, was the first wound Jan carried, a wound that never bled externally but which corrupted every corner of his spirit. Everything changed. Laughter died away. The days grew longer and colder, and the searing questions never found answers. Why did he leave? Jan repeated the query every night, hoping sleep would bring some small consolation, but consolation remained absent. His father's figure became a ghost, representing abandonment, utter rejection, and the perpetual feeling of never being enough. From that moment forward, Jan ceased to trust. He began hoarding every emotion inside himself, hiding his sadness behind a perpetually firm gaze. He learned not to need, not to depend, not to expect affection from anyone. Without realizing it, this became the armor he wore to face the world, an impenetrable shield that protected him, but simultaneously pushed everyone else away. Jan grew up without a guide, without an embrace, without an example to follow. He walked through life groping in the darkness, stumbling over unanswered questions and decisions no one helped him make. His mother, Su-jin, was a woman of fierce spirit but weary countenance. She labored from the first light of dawn until the sun dipped behind the peaks, struggling to raise him with the meager resources she possessed, offering him all her love. Yet, she could not fill the monumental space left by the absent father. She was love, but she could not be the masculine example he craved. There were lessons only a father could impart: the unwavering gaze of support, guidance through the emotional storm, the stern counsel balanced by a protective hug, the silent example that forges true character. That deep lack left roots, invisible yet powerful, that began over the years to twist his soul without his knowledge. Jan learned to hold back tears, to harden his heart, and to retreat into silence when pain struck. Not because he was strong, but because he knew no other way to survive. Tenderness became a luxury, vulnerability a deadly threat. He transformed into a man who appeared whole on the outside, but who remained internally a lost child searching for answers. Time swept past like an unstoppable river current. Days folded into years, and Jan became a man. He built his life with hands calloused by hard labor and scars unseen by the world. He married Min, a woman with a strong heart and an enduring patience, whose voice was a soothing balm on his heaviest days. Min was more than his partner. She was his anchor, his steady balance, his quiet solace. They founded a family and raised 3 distinct children: Tao, the eldest, fiery and impulsive; Lin, the quiet, watchful middle son; and little Jun, the sweet youngest, who seemed to read the very soul of her family. To any observer, Jan possessed everything he ever dreamed of: a loving wife and healthy children under a secure roof. Yet deep in his spirit, something was profoundly wrong. He had failed to cultivate the essential element in his home: true connection, mutual respect, and a genuine bond with his offspring. Though never admitted aloud, that persistent void had begun to sting. When establishing his family, Jan made a silent, solemn vow: "I will not become my father." This promise was born of deep pain, of the memory of cold nights and questions never answered. He swore he would be present, the man he had desperately needed in his own boyhood. But promises of the heart, when not actively nourished daily, fade like mist. Life became complex. His work consumed his strength, debts constantly knocked at the door, exhaustion weighted his back, and frustration amassed like rough stones in his chest. Gradually, imperceptibly, his voice grew scarce. His laughter vanished. His gaze became distant. Men tried to engage him, but he retreated further into the refuge of silence. It wasn't a lack of love, but a forgotten language of how to show it. He became rigid, serious, nearly inaccessible. Without realizing the magnitude of the betrayal, he became absent, just like Gao. He did not physically mistreat his children, but neither did he meet their eyes. He did not raise his voice, yet his silence caused more profound pain than 1,000 screams. His children began erecting their own walls. Tao became more rebellious and challenging. Lin retreated entirely into himself. Jun, though still desperately seeking his attention, began to accept that her father no longer responded. Every night, Jan rationalized that his sacrifice and effort were all driven by love for them. Yet, love is not measured only in sustenance and shelter. It also demands presence, words, caresses, and time. Years marched on, and then, one bleak day, the realization struck. His children no longer listened to him, no longer respected him, and crucially, no longer sought him out. That discovery tore him apart internally. One bitter evening, following a brutal argument with Tao, Jen felt something within him shatter irrevocably. Tao had yelled, his voice thick with contained fury, his eyes brimming with a challenging sorrow. "You don't understand anything. You are just a shadow. You are here, but you aren't here." Jan offered no response. He merely looked down, utterly defeated. He walked in silence toward the old, dusty woodshed at the back of the property, a derelict place where he stored forgotten tools and memories. There, amongst the old wood and cobwebs, he collapsed to his knees, and for the first time in countless years, he wept. His tears were not just for Tao, but for all of them. For Lin, the middle son who had stopped seeking his glance, who no longer shared his secret drawings or ideas. The silent observer who once sat patiently by his side, hoping for a gesture, a single word, until the day he simply stopped waiting. And for Jun, his little one, who still attempted with tender persistence to earn his attention, leaving small wildflowers or drawings on his bed, hoping for a simple thank you, a smile, a sign that her father was still available. But Jan always arrived home exhausted, his eyes perpetually fixed elsewhere. In that isolated shed, he released the weight he had carried for decades. Silent tears for a father who failed to be present, and for the father he himself was rapidly ceasing to be. Tears for every time he chose silence instead of an embrace, for confusing strength with cold distance, for the promises he had made and unknowingly broken. The night was dark, but within Jan a small light began to glow, the desperate desire not to surrender, to change before it was utterly too late. He recalled his mother's words, spoken before she passed away. "You cannot heal the child you were, but you can raise the father you need to be." With a heart overwhelmed by self-recrimination and an alma wounded by his own reflection, Jen decided he could not continue this way. That night in the shed was not merely weeping, it was an awakening. For the first time in years, he grasped that love is insufficient if it remains unspoken, and that he still possessed a narrow window of time, provided he acted immediately. The following morning before dawn, Jan rose with firm resolve. He sought out the elders in the marketplace, questioned old acquaintances from his youth, searching through ancient stories for any indication of help. He was frantic yet totally determined. He needed to understand the root of his failure and how to repair what little remained of his family bond. It was then that one elder, his voice trembling and his gaze full of wisdom, spoke of someone. "If you still hold humility in your heart, go and see Master Shang. He lives beyond the eastern hills, where the cherry trees blossom even in deep winter. He speaks little, but his silences teach more than 1,000 books." Jan did not hesitate. He walked home, a fragile new hope illuminating his path. He approached Min and asked her, his voice softer than she had heard in years, to prepare food because he was undertaking a journey. Min looked up, startled, as she wrapped rice and bread in cloth. "A journey? Where are you going, Jan?" Jan lowered his gaze for a moment, seeking the right words among his painful memories. "Min, you have been an exceptional wife and an even better mother, and that is why I love you so deeply. You You have always been there, attentive to our children, even when I was lost in my own silence. And that failure makes me realize I am not the father I must be. I feel I am losing my children. If I do not act now, it will be irreversible." She walked to him and with a gentle voice responded, "Jan, you have been a good husband and a good provider, and I love you for it. But you have not been the father every child longs for. I want you and our children to be whole again. You still have time. Go find what you need, and when you return, bring it with you. Not only what you learn, but your whole heart." Jan took the provisions, his wooden staff, and with his soul trembling with equal parts hope and dread, he began the journey. He walked for 2 full days along stony trails, through fog-shrouded mountains, and against cold winds that seemed to whisper forgotten truths. He was not seeking comfort. He sought profound wisdom. He knew that if he did not change now, he would lose his children forever. Finally, on the 3rd sunrise, he spotted a small wooden cabin enveloped by 3 cherry trees in full bloom, suggesting time there moved at a different, more spiritual pace. This was the home of Master Shang, a man whose gaze was calm as still water, who carried more years in his soul than on his skin, and who was famed more for his silence than for his words. He appeared as if nature itself had adopted him as a guardian of forgotten truths. Jan took a deep breath. He had arrived, bringing not only desperate questions but the determined will to listen. The elder listened to him in complete silence. His eyes, tranquil as a mountain lake, offered no judgment, only pure presence. Jan, his voice still shaking under the weight of his self-condemnation, cast his eyes down, then lifted them again, the act of a man refusing to hide his pain any longer. "Master, I feel I am losing my children," he whispered. "Tao, my eldest, challenges me with his eyes as if demanding repayment for the years I spent failing to see him. He speaks with rage, and sometimes with a silence that hurts worse than any scream." He paused, breathing deeply. Lin, the second, says nothing. He withdraws entirely into himself, avoiding me. It is as if he doesn't want to inconvenience me with his mere existence. He looks at me with a mix of fear and distance, like I am a complete stranger. Jan's eyes clouded, but he pushed on. "Jun, my little Jun, is different. She watches me in quiet desperation, as if she knows something is wrong with me, but still waits for me to change, as if her love is resilient enough to withstand what the others have already given up on." Jan clenched his fists. "I do not hurt them, Master. I do not strike them, I do not yell, but I am not there. I am not present. I lose myself in work, in my anxious thoughts, and when I am home, I am nothing more than a shadow. I do not listen, I do not embrace, I only demand obedience. And now, as they begin to turn away, I realize I am committing the exact same error as my own father, only with a different face." Master Shang narrowed his eyes, contemplating every word he had absorbed. Then he answered with a voice that was firm, yet deeply compassionate. "You are not guided, Jan, and that is why you feel lost now. But that is not a condemnation, it is a profound opportunity. Your children do not respect you because you have yet to reveal the man you truly are. Respect is never demanded, it is painstakingly constructed. It is built by constant action, like water slowly carving the stone. You do not need to be perfect, Jan. You only need to be present to see them, to hear them, to speak to them with your heart unveiled. That is the essence of being a father." Master Shang rose slowly and walked to the back of his cabin. He returned with a small, intricately carved wooden box. He opened it and carefully removed 3 smooth stones, each engraved with a distinct symbol. "These stones represent 3 principles you must apply if you wish to reclaim the hearts and the respect of your children," the sage instructed, placing them one by one upon the table. Jan stared intently at them. He did not understand the symbols, but he sensed a profound truth hidden within. "Master, what do they signify?" Shang pointed to the first stone, which bore a symbol resembling an ear framed by branches. "This represents presence. Being in the same room as your children is not presence. True presence is meeting their gaze, listening without interruption, sitting beside them without checking the hour. It means your attention cannot be elsewhere. When they speak to you, drop everything for that moment and truly hear them. Make them feel they are the single most important thing in the universe right then. Because if you do not listen to them, Jan, they will seek to be heard by someone else, and that person may not love them as you do." Jan lowered his head, a painful lump forming in his throat. He remembered how many times Tao had tried to tell him something important, and he had only nodded distractedly. The elder then touched the second stone, which featured a symbol of an open heart encircled by flames. This represents vulnerability. Many men mistakenly believe that to be a father is to appear strong at all times. But children do not require a massive wall. They need a genuine bridge. Talk to them. Share your mistakes. Tell them you fear failure but that you are willing to learn alongside them. They do not need a flawless hero. They require a real father, human, imperfect, and close. Jan felt a sharp stab in his chest. He had never once told his children how deeply his own childhood abandonment had wounded him. He always believed sharing that pain would make him seem weak. Finally, Master Shang touched the third stone. Its symbol looked like two hands gently supporting a blooming flower. And this last one is coherence. You cannot teach with words what you fail to demonstrate through your actions. If you want respect, be respectful. If you desire love, give love freely. If you want your children to become honorable men and women, show them the path by walking it yourself first. Coherence is the bedrock of true respect, and it is not built by speeches, but by consistent example. Jan nodded slowly. It was as if every word the master spoke lifted a thick layer of dust from his soul. "But where do I begin, master?" Jan asked, his voice trembling once more. "Begin by returning home. Look your children in the eyes and ask for their forgiveness, not from a place of guilt, but from a place of pure love. Tell them you are ready to change and then start doing it, not with empty promises, but with concrete deeds every single day, even if it is only a single small gesture. You will see that respect will return, not as a grim obligation, but as a precious gift." Jan began his long walk home with a renewed soul. He carefully guarded the 3 stones in his pocket, but more importantly, he carried a deep, unyielding decision in his heart. He did not know if his children would forgive him. He did not know if he could truly regain their respect. But he knew with absolute certainty that he would never be the same man again. When he arrived home, the sun was barely visible through the trees. His wife Min saw him enter, his clothes dusty and his feet sore, but his face held something entirely new. A serenity she had not witnessed in years. Without wasting a moment, Jan sought out Tao. He found his eldest in the yard, chopping wood with a furious, contained energy. "Tao," he said, his voice soft but firm. The young man looked at him with suspicion, expecting a harsh lecture or a reprimand, but Jan simply sat down on a nearby stone. "I have not come here to speak," he said. "I have come to listen to you." Tao frowned in utter confusion. "What?" "I have been deaf for too many years, son. I refuse to be deaf any longer. Tell me what you feel. Even if it hurts me, I need to hear it." Tao dropped the heavy axe. For a long moment, the silence between them was more potent than any words. Then, for the first time, Tao spoke without fear, pouring out his anger, his unanswered questions, and his deep sadness. Jan did not interrupt once. He listened with his heart wide open. "You want to listen now?" Tao choked out. "My entire life you were here, but only as a shadow. You never hugged me, you never told me you were proud. Only silence, always silence. And it hurts, father, it hurts deeply." "You are right, son," Jan replied, tears burning his eyes. "I thought providing food and shelter was enough, but I forgot to give you the most important thing, myself. I failed you, Tao, and I am profoundly sorry. I cannot change the past, but I desperately want to change today. Please, allow me to prove that I can become the father you deserve." That was the first potent seed of presence. Next, he sought Lin, the middle son, perpetually quiet and withdrawn. He found him sitting by the river, carving a small wooden figure. "What are you making, son?" "A tree." Jan sat beside him. "I used to do that too when I was your age. My father never knew, he never saw me carve." Lin looked at him in silence. "I want you to see me, son. I want you to know me, and I want to know you too, if you will allow it." Lin offered no verbal reply, but he reached out and handed his father a piece of unused wood. They carved together until the sun went down. That was the first seed of vulnerability. Finally, he found little Jun, who was weaving wildflowers with her mother. Jan knelt down and simply embraced her. "Forgive me, my daughter," he whispered, his voice cracking. "I know I have been far away, even when I was standing right beside you." Jun, with the silent wisdom reserved only for innocent children, rested her head against her father's chest. "Are you going to stay now?" the little girl asked. "Yes," Jan promised. "But not just with my body, with my whole soul too." From that day forward, Jan committed to living differently, attempting one deliberate action every day. Though he stumbled and occasionally retreated into silence, he always sought forgiveness and immediately tried again. His children witnessed his raw vulnerability and steadfast presence, and their respect instantly returned. He rebuilt their connection, realizing that true courage is not the absence of failure, but the bravery required to confront his own mistakes and shatter the painful generational cycles. He transformed from a phantom in his own home into a steadfast lighthouse. Years later, walking with his children, Jan told them, "I never had a father who taught me how to be a man, but you have taught me how to be a father. Sometimes, the greatest masters are simply your own children, waiting patiently with open hearts, ready to forgive you if you are brave enough to truly return." If you stayed until the final moment, please subscribe, like this video, and share it with someone who desperately needs to hear this message. Thank you for being here. We will see you in the next one.